All right. Hello and welcome. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM. And today we have a fantastic event. So thank you all for joining us. So, please engage in the live chat in YouTube. And also please make sure that you share the link out so other people can join us today. Today, we're talking about a really big subject in trust. And let's face it, trust has been challenged a lot in certainly over the last year or so, as we have had so much like conflicting information and so much arguing and dissent and all of that kind of stuff. That trust seems like a very good subject to talk about. And that's why we've assembled 4 trust experts today to talk to us and to dissect what trust really means and how to build trust, not just at an individual, but also at an organizational level. So again, please share the link. Please join in the live chat. Let us know where you're joining from, because normally we have people from across the globe, which is fantastic. And we love to know where you're joining us from. Okay, so the format is we have 4 guests. We will be asking them questions in turn, and each of them will be answering, and then we'll go kind of round robin on that. We're also on Twitter, don't forget, as well. So make sure you join us on Twitter. Join us on hashtag SalesPOP on Twitter or at SalesPOP, and join in there as well. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Nikolaus Kimla, who is the founder and CEO of Pipeliner, who's going to say a few words to get this show kicked off today. Nikolaus.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are out there. Thanks for our speakers to participate in this very important topic, trust. I basically believe it's not by coincidence that trust is our core principle, one of our 6 principles. Why? Because trust is the future. We have mistrust right now in the last year seen, not only in science. I have no answer to that too, or what happened with COVID. Who we should trust right now? We know it's a sickness. My uncle, the brother of my father, died on COVID, was 90, and he had 2 heart stents, and he had diabetes. So he was old, and it was tragic, but we know that, but science was a big issue. But not only science, medical, as we know, the government around the world to trust anymore. Definitely one of the biggest issue, we will speak that anyhow today, is about data, to trust data. Who can trust the data when we don't know the data? Everybody was doubting the data. And then at the end of the day, it falls back to business. Can we trust this business anymore? Because you cannot trust anyone. So it is a core principle for us at Pipeliner to have trust. Why? Because in every different sales perspective, in a transaction sales, you trust more the product. Yeah. In a consulting sales, you trust the person, the consultant. Yeah. In an enterprise sales, you trust the institution, the brand. Everything is important. And I feel in a scalable environment today, one of the most important things is to trust, to be predictable, and to be dependable. If you're not any longer predictable, it's hard and dependable. I can depend on you. This is all broken, guys. In the last year, that's my opinion. We will see that in the panel. I think that's the challenge. And this is why we brought this topic right now. And I think it's right on. We have to rebuild trust. And I'm looking forward to these discussions.
All right, so let's get straight into it. And the first guest I'd like to welcome is Robin Dreeke. And we would like to ask you, so you wrote this book, Robin, right? Where you said, inspiring trust is not a trick. The book is The Code of Trust. Inspiring trust is not a trick, nor is it an arcane art. It's an important character building endeavor that requires only a sincere desire to be helpful and sensitive, and the ambition to be more successful at work and at home. Okay, so if you want to be trusted, you need to make an active choice to undertake this endeavor. Is that correct, Robin?
Yeah, and thanks everyone for having me on board. Yeah, trust is the most important thing, and it does have to be a very active thing because, genetically and biologically, we are coded to act in our own best interest and to be self-serving, which means that most of us, and also we have all these experiences when we're younger of seeking popularity, which is nothing but power. And power is self-serving. It is not leadership, because trust begets leadership. And leadership is that moment in life when you actually decide, I'm going to be of service to others, and I accomplish missions and goals by being of service, and you cannot lead without trust. And so taking that very active role from reversing it from myself to others by seeking their thoughts and opinions instead of sharing your own, talking in terms of the priorities of others instead of your own, validating others instead of yourself, non-judgmentally, have that non-judgmental curiosity, and empowering them with choices. And then I'm going to harp on this a few times as we come around it again. Consistency, like you said, is extremely important for predictability, because when you have predictability, consistency, you can now reasonably predict what people are going to do, which is trust.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
All right, so I'm jumping right now immediately to Paul. Paul, I love your subject. You are writing and talking a lot about storytelling, and I love stories because originally I'm from Austria. We are a storytelling country. Yeah, we have great stories. So sometimes when you start a story, and I'm almost of every sales call, I have a story in some form to my customers, my prospect, and others, and to my company too. Yeah, because it's big. Painting a picture, it gives something like. But if you paint the picture and it's not real, so what kind of storytelling can build really trust to the prospect, to the customer, or is there a dangers also in that?
Yeah, so that's actually a question I asked professional buyers when I was doing the research for the book. I interviewed obviously a bunch of professional salespeople, but I interviewed professional procurement managers as well. And the question I asked them was, is there anything a salesperson can do to immediately build trust? And I didn't think there was going to be anything, but there were several answers. And the two most popular answers I got to the question was, tell me when you made a mistake before I find out from somebody else. And the second one is, tell me when you're not the best solution for my problem. And I found those very telling. And I think they build trust for the obvious reason, right? If you'll tell your buyer that you've made a mistake before they find out from somebody else, then they can be confident that they'll find out. They're not going to be hidden mistakes that just go uncovered, undiscovered. And then if you tell them to the second one, if you'll tell them when your product or service is not going to be the best solution, they're more likely to believe you when you tell them that you are. Now, where storytelling comes into play in this is you can't just meet a prospect and say, by the way, I'll always tell you if I'm not the best solution to your problem, and I'll always tell you if I make a mistake before you find out from somebody else. Like, that's just not believable. Yes. But if you tell them a story about the last time that you did that, when you made a mistake, told your buyer about it before they discovered it, and it grew confidence, or if you tell them a story about another client whose most of their needs you're able to solve, but there are these one or two needs they have that you've just never been able to solve, and you've told them, that's not something my company can do for you. You're better off with one of my competitors. If you tell them a story about that, then they'll believe you that it will happen. You'll do the same thing for them should the need arise.
Yeah, I like that. I think that is very obvious for a sales situation to build that. Would you see or to start with that? Because I feel if you start immediately introducing it, where's the timing of that? Let's say in a sales process, we're in the B2B sales. We're not in transaction sales. We're more enterprise and consulting sales. So when you see that, in which area you would see the timing of that?
Yeah. So two different places. First of all, you can use stories like this preemptively, like in the course of your rapport building, or early meetings with the client, if you just want to set that tone and set that expectation. The other time, obviously, is when it comes up, like when they're asking about some product or service, and
that's more natural.
It triggers the story. There are dozens of types of stories that you'll tell the prospect over the entire sales process. You don't have to tell all of them one in a row. You can wait for the need to really crop up too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Is that something you can learn to tell a story? Because you see, most salespeople are not so good. They feel good in presenting features and product and PowerPoints. When it comes to tell stories.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, storytelling is an art form like music or dance or painting or something. So there are going to be some people who are just naturally gifted at it and some who are not. But if you wanted to learn how to play the guitar, you could learn, right? You'd go take lessons from somebody who knew. So that's exactly what I do for a living. I teach people how to be better storytellers. So yeah, it may not come naturally to you, but it's a skill like anything else that you can learn if you learn the right process.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Well, also being Irish, we come from a very strong storytelling tradition, although sometimes it's called something else. But, all right. So Randy, we often focus like on trust on an individual level, or mostly when we talk about trust, we're talking about it on an individual level. But what about on an organizational level? Like how can an organization build trust with its customers, with the market, or even with people who want to come and work for it?
Yeah, great question. And as Robin said, super happy to be with all of you today. I'm like just soaking in this wisdom of fellow trust advocates, in the world. That's an interesting question because inherently at its core, trust is an interpersonal dynamic, right? But you can apply, I believe, the same principles to a broader object, in this case, an organization. And, when we see all those surveys out there about, X percentage of people trust the government or trust healthcare or technology or, whatever it is, that's a form of generalized trust. That's a very broad brush of someone's general confidence in something. But to make that more tangible, we've tried to distill that complex topic of trust into the 4 core elements of what trust is. And Robin and Paul have been touching on them already. That first element is, what's your ability? Are you able? These are the ABCDs of trust. Are you able? Is your organization able? Are you competent in what you sell, what you deliver? The second element is believable. Do you act with integrity? Do you do the right thing? Do you walk your talk? Do your values, are they more than just a cool poster on the background? Do you actually live them out, as an organization? The third element is connected. As Robin was saying, trust at its core. Do I care about you? Do I have that spirit of benevolence? Am I looking out for your best interests? And I'm not just self-centered. And then the predictability thing is dependable. Are you dependable? Does your product or service do what you say it does? So if you can really hone in on those ABCDs of trust, able, believable, connected, dependable, represent that from an organizational context in your products, services, then that engenders trust with people. So I think it's the same core principles as interpersonal trust, but you just broaden them out to the organizational level.
So the organization, then obviously everybody across the organization would need to live those principles, and then it would need to be a consistent experience for anybody who engages with you, with your brand, with your company.
Absolutely. I don't trust, if I'm doing business with you, I don't trust sales pipeliner as much as I trust Nikolaus in my interactions with Nikolaus. Nikolaus is sales pipeliner to me in my interactions. So it's this delicate interplay between the individuals and the organizations they represent that create those perceptions of trust, with your consumer, your user, whoever that is.
Excellent. Just want to give a quick shout out to people joining us from around the world. We have people from the UK, Australia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Zambia, Uganda, and obviously a lot of people from the US. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our global audience.
Great. I have the privilege right now to speak with Gregg. He's the founder of the Respect Leadership. And I think that is a core of things that really dives into how you can build the trust chain with respect. So I'm looking forward to Gregg.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nikolaus. This is an honor to be with such wonderful people who have such a great understanding around trust. And I'd like to build on what Paul was talking about, what Randy was talking about, what Robin was talking about by telling you a very quick story.
Yep.
A number of years ago, I was in the market for a new car. I'd done my research and I went into the dealership thinking, okay, here it comes, the glad handing, the over the top, the overly friendly sales technique. And at first, the sales associate kind of used my name one too many times and was smiling a little bit too much. And then as we were going over to look at the car that I was interested in, he surprised the heck out of me. He said, Gregg, it sounds like you've done your research. So I'm guessing you want to know if the mileage we're showing on the sticker is the mileage the car actually gets. Am I right about that? And he was exactly right, because I knew that that company the manufacturer had recently settled a massive federal lawsuit because they've been basically fraudulently posting their mileage. And it was one of the biggest concerns I had about buying this brand. And he went on to say, we made a mistake. He didn't say we did it deliberately, but we made a mistake. We've made up for that. We're now paid our settlements and our fines, and we've made sure that our stickers are 100% accurate. And he blew me away. Here was a car salesman telling me how his company had basically screwed up. And he did it very honestly and openly in a way that he could have lost the sale right then and there. But instead, what happened, I felt like he was treating me with respect and telling me the honest truth. And it was something the three of you talked about, you all talked about. He went out of his way to demonstrate that he had my best interests in mind and that he was open and honest. And instantaneously, my respect and trust in him went up. And after some negotiations, I leased the vehicle, and I've leased 3 more from this guy over the years. And I've never been dissatisfied. It's always worked out. And I just want to say that he started, before he got to that point, he started with respect, which was really cool. He said, would you prefer to be called Mr. Ward, or would you prefer to be called Gregg? What would you prefer? He asked me at the beginning, and I thought, because I do this work, I thought, oh, that's clever. That's very clever. And it's actually, I took it on board for myself, and I do that all the time now. So we believe at the Center for Respectful Leadership that trust takes a little bit of time to build. It can come quickly, but you start with respect, and trust will come if you fulfill the other 4 conditions that Randy was talking about.
I'm what you would say, because I'm often talking to a lot of salespeople around the world and sales manager, really, I have the privilege as the CEO of Pipeliner and the CRM to speak really to the sales manager. And when you have this talk, often I get the feeling that so many salespeople, out of the pressure, they don't respect themselves. And therefore, it is so hard to respect your customer. Yeah. So I get often the feeling, what you would say, building up your own respect, because how you can build trust if you cannot respect yourself. Yeah. Because many salespeople, let's be honest right now in this talk. Yeah. The majority of the salespeople worldwide, the majority is not fulfilling the quota. It is a portion, yeah, but not the majority. Yeah. And they're all, when you never really fulfill your quota, you lose respect, not to your company, not to the product, maybe not to the leadership, to yourself.
Yes.
But when you have no self-respect, it's hard to build. How you help them?
If you have no self-respect, that's going to bleed over into relationships with your clients. They are going to sense it. They're going to pick up on it. So what I do with my clients and what I do in my programs is I lead them through a very simple exercise. We have found that there are three aspects of each other that we respect. One is knowledge and experience. That goes to what Randy was talking about, competency. So I'll ask them, if I was to ask you, what are you knowledgeable and experienced in? What do you expect to be respected for in terms of your knowledge and experience? Then they would say, well, I've been in this industry X number of years. I've been doing this. I know this product. I understand. I said, good. So trust yourself that you know this product. The second is your talents and skills. And I would say, what do you respect in yourself around your talents and skills? What are you good at? Or do you have a specific talent? For example, my wife has an amazing memory. She can, if you walked into, she's in retail, she owns stores, and you walked into her store and she chit-chatted with you for a little while, and then you came back 5 years later, she'd say, your name is so-and-so.
Wow.
And you bought, when you were here last 5 years ago, you bought this, and it's amazing. And it works really well for her. So I say, what do you respect in yourself? And they get that. And the last one is unique because it's about feelings. And it's what do you respect in the way you treat yourself and other people? And so I'm trying to encourage the individual to look at themselves, and then I have them write it all out. And I have them, I want you to state this. I want you to put it on the wall. I respect myself for my knowledge and experience, my talents and skills, and the way I treat other people. And that really boosts their sense of self-respect.
Yeah, no, very helpful. Thank you. That's
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And no, I love that thing about her, about your wife remembering the names like 5 years later. That's fantastic.
That's a talent. That is a talent.
Yeah, no, it is a talent. I'm lucky 5 seconds later if I'm that's just me. Okay, Nicholas, you have another question for Robin.
Yes, Robin, that's an interesting for me really, and I'm looking forward or how you see that and what you will tell us, because you see out of your background where you're coming from and out of your past what you have accomplished, how you can really see immediately when you interact with people, or if they're genuine or really trustworthy, or they are fake, or they are having some hidden agendas. And in sales, we have that very, very often, because you sometimes even in Zoom meetings where people not showing up on screen, you don't know what they do, you don't know what they have behind them. So how you could, or what you can help us here in this problem, or because you're coming from that,
right,
and
first of all, I'll keep capitalizing on what everyone is saying so far, because it's all extremely congruent, which is also a great sign of trust, is congruency between everything you do, both internally and externally. And in the world of recruiting spies, which you think would be full of subterfuge and deception and manipulation and power, it is completely not that. Because think about it, if someone's willing to put their life and their family's lives in your hands, if they can't trust you, you're not going anywhere. I call it the toughest sales job in the world. So the thing I'm really looking for, and I have these 6 signs for behavior prediction, which is trust. And you can assess a few of these really pretty rapidly. Matter of fact, this past year, I formed some partnerships, trusting ones, really pretty rapidly, because I'm seeing a few of them poking out really fast. The first one I'm looking for is vesting. Is this person, how vested are they in your success, and do they see that success tied to theirs? Are they using language, action, and deeds that you can see pretty rapidly that it's this? Are they trying to sell you something, or are they trying to partner with you? I like seeing that. I'm always looking for language as well. I mentioned in my first little segment, I'm looking for someone to demonstrate that they value me and want to affiliate with me as also. Instead of telling me and trying to sell me something that has nothing to do with me, I want to see that they're seeking my thoughts and opinions. I want to see that they're talking in terms of my priorities, my needs, wants, dreams, and aspirations, personal and professional. I want to see that they're validating my thoughts and opinions without judging them. And finally, and ultimately, trust is all about empowering people with choices, because if they're giving me a choice whether to move forward or not, that's really good. And then capitalize on what the others people say too. Trust is the bedrock. When people are demonstrating vulnerability and they're demonstrating transparency, that is huge. And so the next thing I'm looking for is that language. And now I'm looking for congruence with their nonverbal behavior, because great manipulators can do all these things, but what they're going to lack is nonverbal congruence. I'm looking for good, open, honest, accommodating nonverbals, eyebrow elevation, smiling, ventral displays of palms up, engaging, matching tempo to yours. They're not trying to oversell. They're not trying to overcomplicate. They're simple, they're clear, and they're congruent. And when you match all those things together with that respect, and then you add in what I call emotional stability. Do they go off the rails and get emotionally hijacked if you don't like what something you're hearing and you're kind of asking a little clarifying question, or they maintain good, cognitive, thoughtful, clear, concise answers? So those are the things I'm looking at, and you can assess that, especially the language and the nonverbal congruency and that vesting, pretty rapidly.
And yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. I think that is really good when you have like us right now in some form an interaction. What is if the person doesn't show up? If he wants to talk to you, it's a big opportunity, let's say, but you don't know the hidden agenda and you don't see him.
Right.
He doesn't appear on the screen. You appear like you would appear on screen, but he doesn't appear on screen. How you could help salespeople like that? And it's a daily situation for a lot of people.
And I get that too. I recently had a couple clients that wanted to be coached and mentored. They used language as a barrier, and they said they wanted to dialogue just through email, and not through face to face. And so I always default to, all right, let's see how this goes. And I'm always open, and I'm always looking to learn and understand. But I'm also more attuned to what kind of congruence am I getting? Am I getting these signs consistently? Again, I'm looking now for consistency. And are they probing? Is anything out of sync when it comes to any other aspect? So I'm looking for consistency across the board. If I can't see you face to face, and we're just doing email, I'm gonna, as we said at the very beginning of this, patience is a great tool of anyone building trust. I will demonstrate patience. If I can't see and interact with you, at least on a Zoom call, I'm going to demonstrate some patience, just to kind of see where it's going and look for a lot of consistency and a lot of trust, but verify.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I love that, Robin, and what you said there about and looking for the consistency between words and nonverbal communication and seeing whether they're tying together. So you can observe people and see, yes, your words and the way you're delivering them or the way you're acting, there's an incongruency there.
Yeah, and I'm looking for a congruency of the storytelling. Are they consistent over time with the things they're asking, the things they're wanting to do, and the things they're wanting to do together? And I think that's probably the greatest tell you can have, especially if you don't have that in person or the virtual seeing each other back and forth, is the things they're doing consistent over a period of time. So slow it down, because I'm a big believer also of not doing a transactional trust, because that can be a little too quick. I'm more on the longevity signs of trust I'm looking for as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Yeah. So consistency and storytelling, again, being Irish, that's a little difficult because every time we tell the story, it gets a little bit better. So with neuroscientists, right, they say that making decisions, Paul, right, is largely based on emotion. So when you're telling a story, how can you make sure that your storytelling, you're coming across an authentic voice as opposed to maybe being contrived? Because I always worry about, sometimes people feel like they have to put on a show or put on a face or tell a story in a particular way. How do you ensure authenticity?
Yeah, that's a great question, because different people have a different threshold for emotional content in stories. And what you don't want to do is make them feel manipulated. And when you appear to be putting on a show with your story, it feels like manipulation instead of authentic, extemporaneous conversation. So first of all, with your stories, you should just tell stories in the same conversational tone that you and I are having a conversation right now. There should be no big Hollywood, Broadway. It shouldn't feel that way at all. A few other quick tips on that is you can have emotional content, but don't have an emotional delivery. If the story is very emotional, that's fine, but just tell the story. If you're going to tell a sad story, if you start crying, well, now you feel like you're acting, or they're going to feel like you're acting. So emotional content is fine, and emotional delivery is normally not. Another one that my clients in Europe really helped me understand is go easy on the music. A lot of people will videotape their stories, and then they go on a website, and clients can go watch it. And my American clients will go with high production values and hire a Hollywood producer, and it's got a musical score in the background. And then the folks in Europe will watch that, and they're like, "Why are you trying to manipulate us?" Like the music makes it clear that this is a high production sales pitch instead of just a conversation. So no music or very little. Another one is have an emotional palate cleanser between the time you have a high point, an emotional point in a story, and the time you're asking them to make a decision. If you deliver this really awesome emotional story and then you shove the order form in front of them. It's okay, well, buy now. I mean, it makes it obvious that you've used the story in a manipulative way. So have some time in between the story and the ask, so that they have a time for that amygdala that somebody mentioned, that amygdala hijack has time to settle down, so that they're making a rational decision. You don't want to take advantage of that too much.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I actually did years ago, when I was doing a master's in communications and film studies, actually studied the difference between European cinema and the US cinema. And one of the things that you just referred to there, whereas European cinema uses a lot of gaps, silences, right, to accentuate things. US, that's a no-no in most US movies. We don't want any silence, we don't want any gaps. So there are very culturally very significant differences sometimes between how people receive their stories.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So just a quick one. We have a question come in over Twitter, and maybe Nikolaus, when you ask the next question, maybe Randy can touch on this as well. The Twitter participant asked, how can employer and employees build trust during the time of pandemic, especially when people are remote? Okay. So maybe Randy, as you're answering the next, Nick, you want to ask the next question from Randy, and you can just work that answer in as well.
Okay, because Randy, the thing that I would like to ask you is about what you guys are offering and are described very well. To explain it a little bit better, are holistically in the circle of trust. I like that, because a circle is, or what kind of circle of trust? Could you explain to our audience a little bit that?
Yeah, sure. Some of you may remember the movie from a number of years ago, Meet the Parents, with Robert De Niro and Ben Stiller. Remember that movie? You know, and I think Robert De Niro was was he a CIA agent or CIA agent, you know, and he had this little circle of trust, and his future son-in-law, the Ben Stiller character, was trying to break into that circle of trust. And most people think of, you know, we've all got our little circle of trust, and you're either in it or you're out of it, right? And there's not a one-size-fits-all proposition. There's actually, I believe, multiple circles of trust. And so if you think of a series of concentric circles, you know, and starting from the outside, the outermost circle is what I call the crowd. And that's based on a contractual level of trust. You know, that's the typical vendor-buyer relationship, right? We've got contractual terms that ensure, or they're designed to ensure, a trustworthy exchange between us, right? Here's the price, I'll give you this, you give me the money in return. Our level of trust is based on the four corners of that contract. That's sort of the outermost circle of trust. If you go in one level, you have what I call the community. And that's more of a relational basis of trust. And so we have interacted in enough experiences that I have a pretty predictable sense of how you're going to behave, how you're going to react, right? So it's a smaller circle of trust. And then we have that innermost circle of trust, which is really, the academics call it identity-based trust. It's like, those are our closest confidants. I know your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your values. There's a much greater level of vulnerability and risk-taking in there, because that's what trust ultimately is. If there's no risk involved in the relationship, there's no need for trust. That's a sure thing, right? If you have any amount of risk where you make yourself vulnerable to the actions of another, trust is required. And so those are the concentric circles of trust that I like to, you know, help people understand. And in relation to the question that John posed there, I think it goes back to what we've been talking: benevolence, care. Do you care about people? You know, how can you build trust with people during these pandemic times in remote environments? Demonstrate care and concern. How often are you reaching out? How often are you connecting? We have to be much more intentional in our connection efforts in the remote environment, because we don't have those hallway conversations where we just happen to bump into each other, in the office or on the floor of the plant or wherever it may be. So you've got to be much more intentional in demonstrating care and concern for your people.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, absolutely. I love that whole circle of trust. And obviously trust works on so many more different dimensions and levels than maybe most people think when they think about trust. So it's fascinating. Gregg, so you touched on this earlier with your story about the car salesman, but how can salespeople build trust or better build trust with customers when, let's face it, as customers, we often start out from a position of mistrust. So the minute anybody shows up to sell us something, we're already defensive. So how can the salesperson break down that barrier and build trust?
Well, thank you for that question, because it's what Randy said, and Robin and Paul and what you've all been saying sparked something in me. A number of years ago, I was working with a very large technology firm that was developing its technology and selling it to other large firms. And one of the things we found is the salespeople were just off on their own. The meeting with prospects and promising the world about their product. And then they'd come back to the office and say, we made this huge sale. And all the engineers who were in R&D say, we can't do that. Our product doesn't do that. And the salespeople, oh, you'll figure it out. You guys are brilliant. You'll make it work. Well, what happened there is there was an enormous disconnect inside this giant company. They were operating in silos. They weren't talking to each other. So what we tried to say is, look, we've got to break down these silos between you two, the sales and the engineering and R&D folks, so that you are collaborative. No one's promising more than can be delivered, and no one's saying we're not going to release it to the market yet because we're not satisfied. There's got to be some kind of collaborative trust between you internally. And if that happens, then that will bleed over, bad word, that will feel over into working with prospects, because a salesperson could then say, we work very, very closely with the engineers. We know the product will do this, and we'll demonstrate it for it. We'll have the engineers come here and demonstrate it for you to make sure you understand that we are totally in sync. And so if you're in sync internally, then you'll be in sync with your prospects, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I have a question for all, starting with Robin, but maybe that we all engage with that. So it seems to me that society in the last year on some part is slipping a little bit away from trust. We don't trust the data. We don't trust the government sometimes. We don't trust some politicians, or I live in California, so some say something and do differently, but let's leave it there.
The only thing we trust is that the sun will shine most of the time.
most of the time.
And there'll be an earthquake sooner or later.
Yeah. So we have this, the world is it's interesting, and then companies building up exactly the opposite. It's right. Customer centric. It's getting around building this trust or openness, transparency. It is exactly the opposite. Robin, starting with you, because out of your background, what do you see, or is there anything that you could help us a little bit from your background?
Yeah. And I think what we're seeing is, especially, you mentioned a lot of institutions that are untrustworthy because a lot of them are either government institutions or controlled by government institutions, which and this is my background. I come from, an entire career in the government. When you're not for profit, it's easier to seek power than leadership. And leadership brings consistency. And what companies are doing, I work with great companies as well, because, let's all face it. If you're a company and you want to employ one of us because you seek to build trust, it means you're a healthy company to begin with. And so what's happened is companies, just like me in my own life, I am this type A hard charger that I thought power was what things were all about in life for success. Well, when you live life and you actually have to employ it, you see you're going to fail majestically because it doesn't bring results. companies that are going this route are because they understand in order to be successful, you must be client focused. In order to be client focused, you actually have to be internally focused. You actually have to be consistent with how you treat people internally and how you treat people externally. That creates a healthy culture, a circle of trust, as you were saying, so that people feel safe and secure mentally and physically to do the good work in the mission, to move forward with the objective. I mean, these things that we're talking about are what I call the elusive obvious, and if you focus on these things, and the companies that focus on these things are doing it well, and the rest of the world needs to model them. They really do.
Yeah, absolutely. But this
Paul,
is a question.
Paul raised his hand. You want to add something there, Paul?
Yeah, just one of the other questions I asked professional buyers when doing the research for the book was, what is it that makes a sales pitch sound like a sales pitch? And I bring this up now because people begin to lose trust the moment that they realize that they're being sold to, instead of just having a conversation with a partner. And most of the people asked that question to had the same answer. They said, the moment the tone of the conversation shifts from something that's extemporaneous and conversational to something that sounds scripted and memorized, that's when they said the hair on the back of my neck stands up. I know the sales pitch is on, and I immediately go into defensive buyer mode. And you don't want that to happen. So even with your stories that you're telling, I coach my clients, never script out your sales pitch or your sales stories and memorize it word for word, because you'll be tempted to tell it word for word. And that sounds manipulative and scripted and memorized. And the best way to not memorize your script or memorize your pitch or your story word for word is never write it out word for word at all. Just have an outline. And then every time you share it, it'll sound slightly different and it will sound like a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Randy wanted to add something, just a shout out to Bojana from Serbia, and it's another country to add to our global list. So go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, building on what Robin was saying, I don't think we so much have a crisis of trust, Nicholas, as we have a crisis of untrustworthy leaders, as Robin was saying, because that sense of power.
So we have a crisis of leadership.
We have a crisis of leadership. Yeah. Leaders who don't demonstrate trustworthy behavior. And, people often think distrust or mistrust is the opposite of trust.
Yep.
Really, the opposite of trust is control. And so when you see leaders demonstrating controlling, power-based behavior, that's because they don't trust the people that they're supposed to be serving, right? They want to retain control. They want to retain power. And so whenever you start to see that controlling kinds of behaviors, that should clue you in, maybe there's some trust issue dynamics going on here.
Randy, I would agree with that, but I would go a step further. We live in a society that is based on making the decision on data. But if you cannot try the leadership, we are totally in agreement. Yeah, But we have to make decisions on data, quick, fast. And if we cannot trust the data anymore, what we have seen in the last year, if I'm speaking on COVID, and everybody is not doubting it's a sickness, but worldwide, it's really not one country, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So how you can make decisions? So I would say we have both. I agree. We have absolutely. I turned 60, so we're a little bit the older guys, but I strongly believe we need this leadership. Yeah. On the other hand, we have to trust the data. If I make in my company decisions on basis on wrong data, I can be so fast in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I would add, who is representing that data? Where is that data coming from? Right?
Yes.
Because I think we would all probably agree the same data, if presented from a person or institution that's perceived as untrustworthy, could be interpreted totally different than coming from someone else who's perceived as trustworthy, right? And so even beyond the field of trust, just a societal dynamic that we're dealing with is I think we're in a period of challenge where people are having difficulty agreeing on some bedrock principles for how we relate, right? And that's even, a broader discussion than what we're talking about here. But what can we all influence? Only our own behavior, right? Only our own circle of influence. And so,
well, as a manager, I can go and can say, hey, your data, why you putting some data in? Because it starts in the little thing. Why you put some data in, they're incorrect. And I have immediately, you see, we all have to rely on this data, especially, let's say, in a sales content, when you have bigger opportunities and the guy is exaggerating in some form with nice pictures, and you feel, oh God, we have this great opportunity, and it turns out to be a disaster. Yeah. So it starts in the little things, and it needs management there.
Yeah, I agree. I'll turn it over to Gregg. Looks like Gregg has something.
Yeah.
I was going to say history is littered with salespeople cherry picking data in order to benefit themselves. And
Absolutely.
I would argue this isn't just a current problem. I think this is a challenge that goes back to the dawn of civilization, where people have their own self-interest in mind rather than those of the person, of their client, of their prospect. At the end of the day, I try, as you said, who can I influence the most? I've been in some struggles with some vendors recently who really pissed me off, to be honest with you. And but in my dealings with them, as we worked out the challenges, I always tried to remain respectful, calm, and at least two of them were not with me. They were not respectful. And we ended the relationship, but even then I ended it in a way that I believe is respectful, and that's on me. That's my responsibility, because I can go to sleep that night thinking I did my best. I did what I thought was right. And if we can all, and we were talking about this before we began, if we can all just take a moment to take a deep breath. And when we get the amygdala is hijacked and we're going off the rails, and we're all angry and fed up, and we say, you're cherry picking the data. And if we could take a deep breath and say, okay, in the broader spectrum here, what would be the best way to go? Even if we don't have all the data, what would be the best way to go in the best interests of the organization, of the relationship, and so on and so forth? And then sleep on it. Let it marinate overnight. And then the next morning, make a decision, rather than, I know, Nicholas, you're right. We're being asked to make decisions so quickly all the time now. But if we can just take a breath and take the time to marinate, I think outcomes will be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So just a couple of comments from our viewers here. Ellison and says, when communication is effective, trust in the workplace increases. And I think somebody touched on that earlier. Absolutely. And Raphael, trust brings unity in an organization. I couldn't agree more. And thanks for those comments. So before we end this, I'd just like to give, in one sentence, just go around everybody here. And can you just share maybe an aha moment that you had, whether it relates to trust or otherwise, something that really changed the trajectory of how you work and operate? Just in one sentence, an aha moment that you had in your career. Maybe Robin, you're going to go first.
Sure. My personal quote of, it's not how you make people feel about you, it's how you make them feel about themselves, is the really key thing. And then discovering the priorities, goals, and objectives of everyone else around you, and how you can be a resource to make their lives easier. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Paul?
Yeah, one of the people I interviewed in the book told me, it was a buyer, and he said he had two salesmen call on him offering IT solutions to the problem that they had. And one of the salespeople said, yep, we can solve that. Oh, and we can solve that. Oh, and yeah, we're the best at that, and we can solve that. The other guy listened to his problems and scratched his head and said, wow, those are tough problems. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. Well, the second guy got the job. right?
Sure.
Not the first guy, because it was clear that he was really thinking about the problem and how to solve it instead of just trying to sell his company on being the best solution. Be that second guy. That's my advice.
Excellent. And Randy?
I would say for me, one of my career aha moments was based in one of my former leaders who really took a chance on me, trusted my competence, and put me in a situation where I had to really deliver big. And it reinforced the lesson of someone has to go first in extending trust, right? Trust doesn't start until someone first takes the risk to extend it. And it's the leader's job to go first. Leaders extend trust. They don't get the privilege, despite what many think, just by virtue of your position or power, to assume everyone trusts you. You have to first extend trust to others, and then in a reciprocal fashion, it will come back to you. So leaders go first.
Thanks. And Gregg?
Well, the big aha that I had came to me when I was very young. My father was a sports writer, and one day a very important person showed up at the house and my dad was interviewing him. And after the interview, he came out of my dad's office and he saw me standing there, and I'm just a little boy, and he introduced himself to me as Cassius Clay. And he, after a little chit chat, asking me what I wanted to be when I grow up. And he said, well, it sounds like you're going to be successful like your dad. So let me give you a piece of advice. You respect yourself and you respect other people, and you'll do okay. And I've never forgotten that. And it's kind of been my driving wisdom throughout my entire life.
Wow.
Thanks, Gregg.
How
Well,
can you
of
beat
course-
that? Gregg ending on a Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali story.
Yeah.
I mean, come
I
on.
know that's exactly what I was going to say. Randy, is like that tops it all. I've got
Gregg
nothing to
wins.
say. I would love to tell you about my aha moment. I'm still waiting for it. I have a lot of anyway, so listen, this has been fantastic. Nikolaus, please bring it home with a few words, please.
Well, first, thank you for participating. That was a really inspiring morning, and it's really the right thing. That gives me the strength to believe, where people are constantly complaining about what's going on in the world, to go and work for a better day, to make something better for the world. It's exactly what we have spoken, because in the way it is, I not only respect you guys, what you have brought to the table today, but I respect that we are in a change of society. And the more we are giving that out, what we do today is exactly building up it's not only the respect, it's the empathy, that you cannot have almost maybe compassion, but you can have empathy for the people, and that builds trust. And if we all start doing this win to win in a positive sense, and then even in an enjoyable situation, if sales could be enjoyable and fun, then we bring something where we all smile and are saying, wow, that was cool. And I think that's what the world needs right now. We need to go back to a good life, and we can build that. And that's the American dream that brought me guys to America, to build something where we can dream and getting something done for the customer, that he's happy and speak about us. So thank you.
Yeah, listen, fantastic. Listen, this has been an unbelievable event in our Work and Life 2.0 series. The next one that we're going to be doing is around customer experience. So look out for that. We'll be announcing that very soon. But for today, listen, thank you, Robin. Thank you, Gregg. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Randy. There's so much to unpack here. This video will obviously be immediately available on YouTube. So, please share it out, everybody. We will certainly be sharing it far and wide. There's so much wisdom in here and so many things that you can, practical things that you can take and implement, that I would really encourage you to share it far and wide. So again, my name is John Golden from SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM. Nikolaus Kimla, also on his behalf, founder and CEO of Pipeliner CRM, and our fantastic panel of guests. And thank you for everybody around the globe who joined us. It's always, I mean, it's one of my favorite parts, to be honest, is looking at where everybody is from and who's tuned in, because these issues are global issues. So thank you again for today, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next event, which will be all around customer experience. So thank you, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye now.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.